It's a weird feeling today. Normally, I start with, I'm so excited to be here with you, and that is true. But man, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in me right now. I'm excited to be in the house of the Lord. I'm excited to be in front of His Word. I'm excited to worship Him. I'm excited to be with you guys. But just the way this week has been, I don't know that I'm very excited about life in general right now. It's just such a strange feeling. But I do believe God. And I believe that for the past year or two, He's prophetically in messages and in songs been preparing my heart for this moment. And I just keep going back to things that in the past that God has allowed me to preach or to sing message moments and song lyrics. And God has encouraged me in the weirdest of moments this week. And I'm excited about what God, I believe, is doing. And I love Him today. And I'm not going anywhere, I guess is what I'm saying. I love Him no matter what happens, but I'm not going anywhere. And I just need you guys to pray for me, for strength at this moment. You know, if you've been around at all, like my heart is ripping apart right now. And this is hard. It really is. It's the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life. But I still believe today that God is good. And He is faithful, and He doesn't leave. He doesn't forsake us. He doesn't fail us. That He is before us. That He has already experienced today and tomorrow and the next day, and He knows what's coming. And He's behind us. He's been preparing us and for this moment. And I still believe that God is big enough to do something amazing in this story. And I want to say thank you, Rich, for coming in this morning and telling me stories of two people that were in kind of a very similar situation to my mother that people had counted out. And they're walking around on planet Earth today by the grace of God. And my heart needed to hear that today. And I just want to thank you for that. What an amazing thing that our God still can do. And I'm not going to stop believing that. So this morning, I do want to turn our attention to Him because He's who we're here to celebrate this morning. And He's who we're here to talk about this morning. And we're going to do that in Luke chapter 2. And we're just going to continue talking about this Christmas story. We started a few weeks ago this series called Hope is Here. And basically it's a Christmas series, and it's about how when Jesus showed up on planet Earth, hope showed up on planet Earth. And we have hope today because there is a guy named Jesus, and He's still working and moving. And the amazing thing is coming into the story of the birth of Jesus, what we have is a 400-year period of silence from God to His people Israel. And God had not spoken to His people through prophets or messages for 400 years as a community. They have not heard the voice of God. They have not heard God speak from heaven. They have not heard prophets come and speak for God. This is a 400-year drought in the presence and the voice of God. And what's crazy about that is, like, think about how disparaging that would be, right? Like, we don't like when we don't hear from God for just a few minutes. We don't like when we can't tell what God is doing, what He's saying, where He's going. And these people, God's people, endured this for 400 years. They continued their religion. They continued to sing the songs. They had basically already left God before God ever withdrew His voice from them. And for 400 years, they continued in the religion but never heard the voice of God. Never heard a message, never heard a revelation. And for me, I don't know about you, but that would be maybe scary. You'd feel left and forgotten and alone. And then God showed up 400 years after that with the birth of Jesus on planet Earth to speak in the greatest way that He had ever spoken to His people in history. And when Jesus showed up on the planet, what He showed up to do was to say, hey, I haven't forgotten what I've promised you. It may have been a while, right? It may have taken a stretch. There may have been some length there, but here is the one that I promised. I haven't forgotten what I promised you. I haven't left you. I haven't forsaken you. I haven't forgotten you. I'm still the same God, and I'm still speaking. And here came hope on the scene into a very hopeless situation. at the birth of Jesus. And this morning we're going to talk about that in Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2 is like the Christmas story that everybody knows, and it's the one that maybe you guys have read at Christmas or around Christmas before. And in Luke chapter 2, it says, in those days, the days he's talking about are the days of the birth of Jesus, or around those days. In those days, a decree or a ruling, a law came out from Caesar Augustus. Now, Caesar Augustus was the Roman emperor. He had control of the area of Judea and a lot of other area. Roman Empire, kind of a big thing. And he lived from around, or he reigned from around, about 27 BC to 14 AD. And his rule was like a time of peace. He set up this thing called the Pax Romana. And anyway, Caesar Augustus was this emperor, and he sent out this law, and he said that the whole empire should be registered. All the people in all the Roman Empire have to be registered. They were going to take a census. Now, why do you need to do that? You need to do that because if you're going to tax people, you got to know how many people you got to tax. So he was trying to figure out how to get the dollars in the vault, and he came up with a way. Hey, let's get together and let's register everybody. Let's get everybody registered, numbered, and we'll know how much money we should be receiving from everywhere. And it said, this first registration took place while Quirinius, whoever that guy is, was governing Syria. You might be like, well, Jesus wasn't born in Syria. Why does that matter? Quirinius was in charge of a massive land that wasn't just Israel. It was Syria and some other places, but it also encompassed Judea and all the other parts of Israel. And Quirinius was a guy that became the actual ruler of this whole landmass in about 6 AD. Now, if you were here, I think it was last week, we talked about King Herod the Great was in charge of this area, and now we have Quirinius that's in charge of this area, and the time periods don't match up. And 6 AD is not actually like when Jesus was born. It was way before that. So it looks like there's a discrepancy here, but this word governing just means that he was in charge of something. The thing that he was in charge of was the census. So he's not the governor or the ruler of all this land. He was just the guy in charge of the census, and this probably prepared him to take over and become the actual governor after the death of King Herod. So here's Quirinius, and he was governing Syria, and he set out to do this census. And it says, so everyone went to be registered, each to his own town. Now, when the empire says something, you probably should do it. So that's a pretty good idea in the text there. But you may be looking at me like, why are you telling me all this? I didn't come to history class. This is not what I wanted to know today. I don't care about Quirinius, whoever that guy is. Not going to Google him later. Don't actually care about Caesar Augustus. He's in the ground somewhere. Not a big deal to me. Why did I come here for a history lesson? And you didn't. I just wanted you to know, and the story, I believe, wants you to know that this is not some fairy tale. Like, this is grounded in reality because it really happened. So God attached some names throughout history to this book so that we would know these are real people and real places and a real time, and this really happened. So why is that important? Why does it matter that we have that grounding in reality? Because this is a different story than I think the one we used last week was The Little Mermaid, right? Like, this is not some fairy tale or some made-up story or thing. This is real. And the difference is this should affect us. Whatever we're about to read should affect us. It should change us. There should be some reaction to it. Little Mermaid, I watch it. It's a great movie. Love the songs. Ursula is one of the best villains in the Disney universe. I totally get that, but it doesn't change my life. But Jesus should. And we have to know today with certainty that he is who he says he is. He was real. He still is real. He was living. He still is living. And that should affect us. And that's why God put that on there, because we can look up these things and see these are real people in real places. And God's not afraid that we're going to find some discrepancy or something, so he attached a date to it on a calendar. He said, look it up. This is really my son. This really happened, and it really should change you. So everybody went to be registered, numbered, each to his own town. Now, the own town it's talking about is not like where they're currently living, but where their family lineage came from. And it says, and Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee. Pretty good idea to follow the law. So here's Joseph, pretty good guy. And he went up from this town Nazareth in Galilee. Now, Nazareth is like a town of about 400 people at this period of time in kind of the northern region of Israel. Galilee is the northern part of Israel. It's split into three parts, Galilee, Samaria, and Judea. It's kind of like Tennessee if you just turned it up this way. So you have the northern region, Galilee. You have the middle of Israel, which is Samaria. And then down at the bottom, you have Judea. And they are in a population, a town of about 400 people in that very northernmost part of Israel. In other words, Joseph, not really probably an important guy, not really from an important city. We don't know much about him other than he's a guy named Joseph at this point in the story. Don't know what he did, don't know what his job or his hobbies were. Actually, probably what it's communicating through just telling us this is Joseph is not some really important guy to history. He didn't rule a kingdom. He did not serve as high priest. He was just random Joe from Galilee. And Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee, and he went to Judea, the southernmost part of Israel, to the city of David, which is where his family line come from. He was a descendant of David, which is called Bethlehem. He went to this little city, Bethlehem, in the very southernmost part of Israel. I looked it up last night, and I knew how many miles it was. I'm going to say that it's 90, but like I said, my brain's not working great right now, so don't be mad at me if I lied to you, but a long way away. So he had to, because of this registration, Joseph had to leave his town, and he had to go all the way 90 miles away to the lower part of Israel. And you think about that, they don't have cars, they don't have planes, they don't have trucks, they don't have blimps, right? Like he's walking all the way here 90 miles. It's going to be kind of a trip. And that would be bad, right? That would not be fun. I don't want to go walk 90 miles. I don't know that the past week I've walked 2 miles. So that's a long way, and he has to do all this on foot. And that would be bad enough in itself, but it says in 5, he had to be registered along with Mary. Okay, we've heard that name before. Don't get much about her because she's also from Nazareth, a little 400 people town, and she wasn't a princess, she wasn't a priestess, she was just a girl. Not very important in the scope of history, wouldn't have made it into the history books. Here's Mary, and she was engaged to him. They weren't married yet, but as we talked about legally, engagements, this contract, it's just like you already are married in this time. And it says, and she was pregnant. Okay, now the story gets interesting, right? Imagine that. We're going to read a little more, but she's very pregnant. And it's going to take her about a week to get from one place to the other, and then there's going to be a baby. She's very pregnant. We have Mary who's pregnant, and now Mary has to also make a 90-mile journey from her town, right, where she has her family structure and her support, and she knows where everything is, and she has a home, and there's places that she can be and people that she can be around. She's very pregnant, and now she's got to leave all of that because of this census, this registration, and she's got to walk a week's journey, probably 90 miles away. And you're like, but there was a donkey. I didn't read about a donkey in this story. I think we just put that in the Precious Moments version. She had to walk 90 miles from Nazareth all the way to Bethlehem. Very pregnant woman walking all the way from Nazareth to Bethlehem, losing at that point in time the place that she would have prepared to have this baby. Losing at that point in time the people she would have prepared to be around as she had this baby. Can you imagine being almost about to have a baby and walking 90 miles just in a trip? That'd be frustrating, right? That'd be like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this? And I don't want to do this. And she probably complained a little bit about the census and all those things, but God was doing something. She just didn't see it yet. So they walked 90 miles away from Nazareth all the way down to Bethlehem. And it says because he was of the house and the family line of David, right? Prophecy, Jesus has to come from that family. To be registered along with Mary, who was engaged to him and was pregnant. And it says that in 6, while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. Now, I don't know how this happened. I don't know if they rolled up in town and it was like, hey, I think I'm going to have a baby sometime soon. I don't know if they were there for a week or a day or whatever. It doesn't give any time period. But if we keep reading the story, we figure out that it probably happened like this. About the time they get to Bethlehem, she looks at Joseph probably a little freaking out, and says, hey, I think I'm having this baby. And he probably looks back and he's like, you can't have this baby right now. We just got to town. We don't have anywhere to stay. We don't have anything to do. We don't know anybody here. We don't know how we're going to have this baby here. And there becomes this amazing moment of like, what in the world is going on? You can't have this baby right now. And she's like, no, I'm pretty sure water broke. I'm having this baby right now. And it becomes a moment of tension, right? And maybe a little bit of freak out because we just rolled into Bethlehem. We don't have a place to stay. We don't have any people here. And I can't have this baby right now. Like the most amazing roadside pregnancy ever, right? It says, while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And then in verse 7, it looks so calm and peaceful. It says, then she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him snugly in cloth and laid him in a feeding trough because there was no room for them in the inn. Close the book, right? That's like all we think about it. Because it looks, right, like this Silent Night manger scene, right, with this little bitty nice log stable that's very clean and has lots of moss everywhere. And there's this little angel on the roof, and the donkeys are there, and the sheep are there, and they're all calm, and they don't make any noise. And they don't smell bad, and it looks like this amazing, great situation every time we represent it. And it's because they packed all that information into one verse. But I don't know about you, but I've never seen, like on a movie or a TV show, this then she gave birth thing at the pregnancy, right? There's like some screaming and yelling and some breaking of hands and maybe some words that we're not going to say at church. Like there's this whole thing of pain and process that's happening here. And we look at this and there's this verse and we're like, probably pretty cool. It's just a little peaceful Silent Night kind of thing. And this lady was in labor, right? A little less calm probably than what we'd see in the situation. Compounded by the fact that we see that she had this baby in a stable or a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now think about that verse, because that tells us everything we need to know about what happened when they rolled up into Bethlehem, right? They came to Bethlehem, they just pulled into town, they didn't have anywhere to stay. If they had somewhere to stay, she wouldn't have had it in a stable, right? There wasn't like a Ramada Inn Bethlehem or a Marriott Bethlehem. Bethlehem's a small town, and there was probably one inn and one place to stay. And everybody that was from the city of David and their lineage had come to this town to be registered, right? The situation is not a fun situation because everybody that was from the family of David had to show up in this city. Not just two people, not just Mary and Joseph, but everybody from that family would have had to go here. Which means when they get here, probably compounded by the fact that they were really far away, 90 miles away in Nazareth, and they were coming that distance, but also because not only were they coming 90 miles, they were coming 90 miles with a pregnant lady. She's not going to walk as fast as everybody else. She's not going to move as fast as everybody else. Probably they traveled there alone, which is a dangerous situation in itself and a scary situation in itself. And they show up to this place, and they get into town, and they think probably we got some time to find a place. We can kind of look around, see where we're going to stay. And she looks at him, and she's like, I'm having this baby right now. And he looks back, and he's like, you can't have this baby right now. And she's like, I don't have a choice. I'm having this baby right now. And he's like, that is not possible. And she looks back, and she's like, nope, the water broke. We got to find a place right now to have this baby, or we're going to have this baby in a field. So they go to the inn as quickly as they can. They get to the innkeeper, and they're like, hey, we got to have a room. And he's like, we don't have a room. And he's like, she's pregnant. And he's like, I don't care. We don't have a room. We got to have this baby somewhere. And he's like, not my problem because I don't know you. There's not a room. And then they're out of hope in that situation. So they are left without a place to stay and a place to deliver this baby. And then we got to decide, what are we going to do, right? Are we going to have this baby out here on the doorstep or in this field, or are we going to figure out a place inside with some shelter to have this baby? And about that time, probably Joseph looks over and he sees this hole in the side of a cliff. That's what it's talking about when it says a stable or a manger, by the way. It's not this little cute little scene that you have probably sitting on something at your house with this little nice wooden structure, little barn doors and stuff like that. It's a hole in the side of a cliff, a cave. Right, a place that's dark and probably damp. And if the animals stay there, which they do, because it says it's a stable or a manger, it's a place that probably smells a little funny. Right? I don't know if you've ever been to a farm. I have one if you want to come explore. Wear not good shoes. Because animals do what animals do, right? They don't go to the bathroom in a porcelain bowl. They just go where they go, right? And if there's animals living in this cave, then there's animal byproduct in this cave. It's unsanitary, right? I don't think the shepherds were up there sweeping out the caves, shoveling out the caves. It smells funny. It's not clean. But it's the option. It's not a option. It's the option. It's the option that they get. It's the only option that they have. And they have to make a decision. Are we going to have this baby in at least somewhere covered, at least a shelter, or are we going to have it out here in the field? They go into this cave. Those two people, I don't know about you, but I doubt Joseph had been part of many childbirths. Probably didn't really know the procedures and the things to do. But you don't get to choose that if the baby's coming. They didn't have a doctor, right? They didn't have a nurse. They didn't have a midwife. They didn't have any of that stuff. You have Mary and Joseph in a cave. A filthy, nasty, stinky cave full of animals. And then labor happens. Not then she gave birth, but then she pushed and screamed and breathed hard and there was pain, right? Joseph lost a couple fingers to the pressure, right? This is the situation in the manger. She finally, however long that took, gave birth to this son. And then it said she wrapped him snugly in cloth. Now, I don't know about you, but I doubt they brought newborn baby blankets to this. So whatever cloth they had was cloth they brought with them or cloth they found in the cave. Not made for wrapping a baby, just maybe some blanket they had been using on their journey. Not with a little baby beanie, blue or pink, right? Little baby socks, blue or pink. Little baby shirt, blue or pink. We didn't have any of that. Just some blanket they had from something. They wrapped this baby up, and then it says they laid him snugly. That's a cute word. And they laid him in a feeding trough. Now, a feeding trough, what is that? That's where animals eat out of, right? Not a crib or a cradle, but a feeding trough, a place where animals actually eat their food. They probably padded it maybe with a little hay, pokey hay. Think about that. You ever laid down on hay? That sounds really fun, doesn't it? It's actually awful, but it's what they had in this place where animals eat out of, this feeding trough. Anybody want to go lay in a feeding trough later? I have one. No, right, because I don't know if you've ever been around cows, but they spit when they eat, and it just comes out. Mixes with whatever's in there. I'm sure it's the same for other animals. And this is the place where they had to lay their son. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was to read any of that story, I wouldn't have chosen any of that. Would you? If you wanted to have a baby or you were a baby, I don't think that you would sign up for this primitive pregnancy, right? Oh, yeah, I'd love to be 9 months pregnant and walk 90 miles to a town I've probably never been to, full of people that I've never met before, to have a place, to not have a place to stay, can't find one, to start to have the baby and then have to go in this cave because there's no other options, to go through this labor with just my husband who has no idea what he's doing, right? No midwife, no family structure, just me and him in a dark, stinky cave full of animal stuff. And then have this baby and then wrap this baby in less than what I would have wanted. And then lay him in a feeding trough, which is less than what I would have wanted. I don't think anybody would have chose any of that. If you ask Mary and Joseph beforehand, hey, you're going to have this baby, do you want to travel to Bethlehem? They would have probably said no. Hey, you're going to have this baby, would you rather have it in the inn or the feeding trough? I think they would have said the inn, right? None of this was a situation that any of them would have chosen to be in, but here's kind of the headline of the story. Who is this baby? It's Jesus. It's the Son of God. Who chose for him to be born in this way? Was it Mary or Joseph? No. Was it Caesar Augustus or Quirinius? No. Was it the innkeeper? No. None of those people chose any of these things. All these people were just useful pawns in our ability to get to this place, right? Like if God didn't choose this, he could have just said, we're not having a census right now. He could have just said, Augustus, we're not doing that. Quirinius, we're not doing that. He could have just said, we're not going to have him in Bethlehem, right? We're going to have him in Nazareth. He could have changed anything about this story. He could have changed who Jesus was born to. He was born to two people that we know very little about because in the context of history, they're not really important players. They never would have made it into a history book. They never were kings or queens or princes or princesses. They were just two people from a population a 400 people town that nobody probably has really heard of other than the Christmas story, Nazareth. And then they went to Bethlehem, another town that, except for the Christmas story, probably nobody would know. It wasn't the capital of Israel. It was just this little town. Who chose the way the son would be born except for the father? Not Joseph, but the actual father, right? God, the one who has all the power, all the control, all the ability. That's how we got into this place. So you had to ask yourself, if God chose for his son to be born in this way, why did God choose for his son to be born in this way? Why in the world would God, who could have arranged this anyway, choose for Jesus to be born in this way? Do you know that God had the choice of parents? He could have picked anybody on the planet and in any time period that he wanted to. Jesus could have been born yesterday and it wouldn't have messed up the story. Jesus could have been born 1,000 years before this and it wouldn't have messed up the story. It's still the Savior coming to earth, right? It's still a big deal. He could have been born in any place, right? He could have been born to any parents. He could have been born to somebody who was the king of Israel, right? He could have been born to somebody who was like a high priest. He could have come into a prominent and important family, but he didn't. He could have been born in a palace. He could have been born in a mansion. He could have been born in a hospital surrounded by people that knew what they were doing. He could have had any of that, but God chose this way for his son to be born. To come into this mess, to come into this horrible situation that nobody would want. Nobody in this room or outside of this room would sign up for their kid to be born this way. Oh yeah, put him in the hay. Oh yeah, let's walk 90 miles. Oh yeah, I would love it. I would love it. I would love it if I had to stand in animal poop and have a kid. Nobody would have wanted that. Nobody would sign up for that. But this is what God chose for his son Jesus. Now, why did he do that? Does God not like Jesus? Why would you put him through that if you liked him, right? No, God loves Jesus. I'm pretty sure that's true biblically. I'm pretty sure I can back that up. Was God mad at Jesus? I don't think so. Pretty sure biblically I can back that up. This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, right? Like I'm loved and pleased. None of this mess happened because either of those things weren't true. None of this mess happened because God had left anybody. None of this mess happened because God dropped the ball. This is something that God had planned. Where did Jesus have to be born? Bethlehem. Where did Mary and Joseph live? Nazareth. How are we going to get them there? We got to have a census. They got to go back home. We got to get them to this place. Why didn't the room in the inn have a place? Because that's not where God registered for them to spend the night that night. God wanted Jesus to be born in this way. Why did God want Jesus to be born in a mess? In a situation that nobody would want to be in? Why did God want him to be born into this moment? Why did God want any of that? And here's what I've come up with as I've prayed about this. It's because God wanted us to know Jesus was not afraid to enter into a mess. Jesus was not afraid to come down and to get into the mess with us. He was not afraid to come down and to get a little dirty. He was not afraid to come down and to be a little uncomfortable. He was not afraid to come down and to be involved in any of these things. God was not exempt from the mess because God is not afraid of a mess. Jesus stepped down right into this moment. And what's crazy is right in the middle of this mess, the biggest miracle that has ever happened on planet Earth was born. Right in the middle of this crazy situation, right? Like if the son wasn't Jesus, the story wouldn't be important. Nobody would be sitting on stage today talking about a couple from Nazareth that moved to Bethlehem and had a kid in a stable this morning if the son wasn't Jesus. The important part of this story, even though we mess it up every time we tell it, right? We get him in this little wooden, nice, clean place with lots of soft moss to lay in, and Jesus in this cute little unused feeding trough that doesn't have anything in it, and none of the animals have ever used the bathroom, and there's hay everywhere. It's very sanitary. That's how we tell the story. None of that is true. This was a mess. This was a situation nobody would want to be in. This was a situation going into they were probably fussing about, and in that moment we're probably fussing about, but this is a situation that God chose for them to be in. And what's amazing about that is wherever you are today, whatever mess you're in today, you're in a situation today that God chose for you to be in. He goes before us and behind us, and He's with us everywhere we are. He plans out things in advance. He's already been in tomorrow, and He knows what tomorrow holds. Wherever we are today, God has planned it for us, and even if it's messy, and even if it's horrible, and even if we don't want to be there, God will still enter that situation with us. See, the amazing part about the manger scene is not Mary and Joseph and the donkeys and the shepherds. The amazing part about the manger scene to me is even in all that, even in all the craziness, even in all the filth, here is God smack dab in the middle of this mess. The greatest miracle God has ever performed in the universe in all of time is Him coming down from heaven to earth. The biggest miracle that has ever happened in the middle of a mess. Actually, I'm going to be honest with you today. There's no such thing as a miracle that does not first start with a mess. There is no such thing as a miracle that does not first start with a mess. I just want you to know that today. There's no such thing as a miracle that does not first start with a mess. Healthy people don't need a miracle. Wealthy people don't need a miracle today. People that have it all together, they don't need a miracle today. People that have everything kind of perfectly held together, they don't need a miracle today. You know who needs a miracle today? The people that everything is falling apart for. The people that are somewhere they'd never planned to be. The people that are in this situation that's filthy and messy that they'd rather not be in. That's the people that need a miracle. And when that's the situation we're in, that's the prime time for God to come in and to do something. When we're in that place we would never want to be, that's the moment where God can step in. When we're in a place where nobody else can do anything to help us, that's the place that God wants to come into. When we're in that moment where there's nothing on the planet that can change our situation, then the guy who created the planet is the one who wants to step into our situation. That's how miracles work. Miracles are created in the mess. Miracles today are created in the mess. And if you are in a mess today, you are in a prime spot for a miracle. If everything's fallen apart for you today, you are in a prime spot for a miracle. Isn't it amazing that we have a God today who doesn't only show up when everything's okay in our life? You say amen to that. Isn't it amazing today that we have a God who doesn't care to spend time with us in the filth and in the hurt of a situation? Isn't it amazing today that we have a God who, when everybody else says, I don't want to be here, says, I want to be there. That's where I want to be. That's where I chose to be. See, the amazing thing today is wherever we are, this is exactly where God would have us to be. And that means we are not lost today, and we are not alone today, and we are not without hope today. We are exactly where God has placed us. He has not dropped the ball. He has not missed some signal somewhere. He has not missed some cue somewhere. Wherever we are, as much as it hurts, as hard as it is, this is the day the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. I am already today standing right here in the middle of where God wants me to be. And I'm going to be honest with you from my own life today. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this mess. I don't want to be in this filthy situation. I don't want to be right here. But what I know today is God wants me to be right here. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't want it, but I know that's where He wants me. And there is some comfort in that today. That God has not dropped the ball in my life. God has not left me. He has not forgotten me. This is the spot that He has chosen for me today. And I have a choice today to either stand in it in faith, or stand in it in fear. But either way today, I'm standing in it. I cannot change where I am today. I'm powerless and helpless, by the way, just like you are, to change where I am today. But I'm standing in faith, knowing that this is the spot today, right now, that God has chosen for me, and there's not one thing I could have done different, I would have still been right here. There's not one thing I could have changed. I would have still been right here. And what I know is, if this is the spot that God has chosen for me, He is doing something in this spot right now. I am not alone in this mess. I am not alone in this hurt. I am not alone in this situation. God has chosen it, and this is the messiest mess I've ever been in. But I know today, more than anything else, that God is with me in this moment. He is with me in this moment. I feel Him right now like I have never felt Him before. In this hurt, I feel Him like I've never felt Him before. In this fear, I feel Him like I've never felt Him before. And it sucks, and I don't want to be here, but I am not alone today in this. Because in the messiest mess is where God does the biggest miracles. And I don't pretend today to know what God is going to do. I'm going to let you know, in this story, Mary and Joseph had no idea what God was going to do. But that's okay, because God knows what God's going to do. If God got me to this spot, God will move me from this spot. And I just want you to know today, you may not be in the spot that I'm in, but the same story is true. You may not be standing in the same spot that I am today, but the same thing is true for you. If God got you to it, He will get you through it. We are standing today exactly where He wants us to be, no matter what it feels like, if it's so joyful or we're breaking apart on the inside. There is a sovereign God in heaven who is completely in charge today, totally in charge today, who moves emperors to move me. He knows where I am, and He knows where you are. And whether you're in the best situation, best moments of your life, or you're in the worst moments of your life, He is with you right now. If you're in the messiest mess, He is with you right now. And our God does miracles.